Do. Hi. Today we're reading Together Forever, finishing that story off, which I'm kind of just trying to get through so I can get to the epilogue. But Together Forever apparently has a pretty good ending compared to the rest of the story, which has basically been Mean Girls and has not been very interesting. But it seems like someone is going to get spring locked. I'm assuming probably Brittany and Jessica to get kind of what's coming to them. I don't know. We'll see. Right now, they're discussing commands to make their little animatronic they're fixing up do. Mostly to torture these other little girls in their school. Let's continue. Brittany broke down. Maybe just for fun we could do roll over and play dead. Jessica threw back her head and guffawed. Oh my gosh, stop it. That's too good. She typed in her document, roll over, play dead. Jessica laughed harder. That makes me think of Titan. If he was here, he'd be giving a 5. Brittany grinned at Jessica. That should do that too. Jessica nodded enthusiastically. They should do all of Titan's tricks. Spin, Brittany said. She grinned. And bow. Jessica chuckled and typed, give 5, spin, bow. Okay, seriously though, Jessica said. This is all good for laughs, but what could they do that would actually be helpful? Brittany tapped her lower teeth as she pondered. Carry our bags, polish our nails, especially our toenails, dry our hair, brush our hair, style our hair. But first, Rosie has to, grab those little freaks, pick them up, and put them inside her belly. Jessica tapped the keys on her computer, but then reached for the papers Mr. Thornton had handed her earlier. What's up? Brittany asked. Jessica waved her off. Trying to figure out how we can get Rosie to recognize and make a beeline for the 2 brats first thing tomorrow. After skimming through all the possible commands, she noticed a section called vocoder system. Apparently Rosie's vocoder system, which allowed her to interpret spoken commands, could also differentiate between the voices of adults and children. She was currently programmed to approach children and avoid adults. Made sense for a kitty animatronic, she guessed. Jessica smiled. Cindy's and Mindy's chirping kid sounds had not dropped yet, so Rosie could be sure to zero in on them. Jessica just had to take the code one step further for Rosie to approach, then grab kids. As she started typing, a noise from the front of the classroom spun her around. What was that? Brittany had spun too. She was staring wide-eyed toward Mr. Thornton's desk. I saw something move, Brittany hissed. I thought I did too, Jessica whispered back. Both girls stood. Holding hands, they took a tentative step toward the front of the classroom. The second they did, something shifted on Mr. Thornton's desk. They both jumped back. What was that? Brittany yelped. Jessica shook her head and frowned. She looked around the classroom. It felt like all the robot eyes and all the robot heads were watching them. She tugged on Brittany's hand and moved forward again. Brittany pulled free to grab a robotic arm off one of the pegboards. Good thinking, Jessica said. I know, right? Brittany nodded several times. They crept forward together until a click stopped them. Jessica cocked her head, listening. She heard a fluttery sound, like a bird flapping its wings. Brittany raised the robotic arm, readying for a fight. Jessica shook her head, but she moved forward again, looking hard at Mr. Thornton's desk. Brittany was right at her side. Suddenly, something shot out from behind Mr. Thornton's desk and skittered over the floor toward them. Jessica screamed. Brittany screamed too, but she also charged. Running forward, still screaming, she brought down the robotic arm and slammed it onto the ground. The impact made a metallic crack. No, not into the ground, into something on the ground. Brittany raised the arm and brought it down again, another metallic crack. What is it? Jessica asked. Brittany stepped back, robotic arm still poised for action. She looked down and she didn't wield the arm again. So, Jessica stepped up beside her. It looks like a rat, Brittany said. Yeah, if rats were made of metal. Jessica and Brittany looked at each other. A robotic rat? Brittany asked. They looked at it. A flexible steel cable originating at the back of the robotic rat twitched. Brittany stomped on it. The cable stopped moving. Brittany looked at Jessica, frowned, and then looked around the room. Do you, think anything else is going to come to life? Besides Rosie? I hope not. Jessica gazed at the robotic parts on the pegboards warily. A chill slithered through her body. She shook it off. Come on, let's just do this so we can get out of here. For sure, Brittany said. Jessica sat down at the back table again and peered at her computer screen. Where was I? Brittany sat down behind Jessica, still holding tight to the robotic arm. You were putting in the grab the kid commands, Brittany said. Right. Jessica started typing again. When she finished, she asked, Okay, what else do we want them to do? Well, they seem pretty brainy. I wonder if their, brain power could interface with Rosie's AI. Could they do, homework for us? Jessica said. That would be rad, but I think that would take a programmer better than me to code that. Brittany sighed. Yeah, just thought I'd throw it out there. I like it. Maybe it's something we can add later. We could talk to one of the computer nerds into helping us. Oh, that's brilliant, Brittany said. So back to everyday commands. Make your smoothie? Good one, Jessica typed. And packing your lunch? She typed some more. Right, Brittany said. What about cooking? Jessica screwed up her face in thought, then started typing. Brittany leaned over and watched. Oh, basic cooking commands. Good thinking. It's something we'll have to do later, but I figured we should put it on the list. Jessica sat back. Okay, well, I should probably start coding for Rosie to pick up the girls and put them in her belly, then I'll do the commands for getting things and bringing them to us. She started typing. Brittany pointed at the computer screen. I think you got that backward. Isn't that the code for the kids, not the adults? Jessica looked and shook her head. Good eye, sorry, blonde moment. They looked at each other and laughed. Jessica returned to typing. The programming was a lot harder than she thought it would be, and after an hour or so, her eyes were tired. She reached up and rubbed the back of her neck, and shrugged her shoulders toward her ears. I'd offered to take over for a while, but I totally suck at programming, Brittany said. It's okay, Jessica nodded. Brittany shoved her chair back. But I could rub your shoulders for you. Jessica smiled. That would be great. Thanks. Brittany affected a British lady's maid accent. Oh, no. I'm going to try and do the accent, but I'm going to butcher it. Here we go. You're welcome. Oh, no. Okay, I'm not doing it. You're welcome, milady. She started rubbing Jessica's shoulders. Then she stopped. We should have Rosie call us milady. Jessica grinned. That's a great idea. She squinted at the screen and started typing. I can't get over that accent. I should do my best ozone impression. Hey, what's up, brozones? It's me. No one tell him I did that. Okay, I'm going to continue. Sorry. Jessica worked on Rosie's code for 3 more hours. It was after midnight when she typed in the last of the code and sat back. Okay, she said. If we did this right, these commands should have been downloading into Rosie as we created them. All we need to do now is disconnect her, unplug her from the wall, and activate her. Unplugging her computer, Jessica looked at Rosie's control panel. She's fully charged. I think if we activate her now, she'll be good to go in the morning. Then she can grab Cindy and Mindy when they get here for their early workshop time. We have to be sure we get here in time so we can see that, Brittany said. She looked at her gold watch. We won't have much time for beauty sleep. We don't need much beauty sleep, Jessica said. They laughed. In perfectly synchronized motion, they both got out their lip gloss and freshened up their lips, then stood up from the table. Ah, as women do. Go ahead and activate her, Jessica said to Brittany. Brittany grinned and reached behind Rosie's neck. She flipped a switch. As soon as she did, the cover to Rosie's control panel closed. With a click and a whir, Rosie blinked her eyes. Her head swiveled this way and that. Her gaze landed on Jessica. She blinked again and turned to look at Brittany. Another click sounded from inside Rosie, and she rose up off the cart. Once she was off the cart, she stood still, looking at Brittany. What's she doing? Brittany asked. Jessica shook her head. Maybe she's just getting ready? She shoved her laptop back into her backpack and started to zip up the pack. Before Jessica could close her backpack, Rosie reached out and grabbed Brittany by the shoulders. Brittany screamed, Ow, what's she doing? Jessica turned toward Rosie and her friend, and she stared in disbelief. Rosie's pink hands were full-on clamped down on Brittany's right bicep. Brittany tried to wrench herself free from Rosie's grasp, but that just resulted in Rosie's metal fingers, padded only slightly by pink felt, digging in deeper. They cut through Brittany's bare skin, drawing blood. Jessica watched in horror as the blood trickled down to Brittany's elbow and dripped onto her shirt. Brittany cried out, Jessica, do something! Brittany tried to reach with her free arm to deactivate Rosie, but before she could, Rosie's hydraulic-driven strength yanked Brittany off her feet and twirled her upside down. Rosie's belly access door dropped open with a hiss, and Rosie lifted Brittany out and away from her belly, so Brittany was hovering in the air parallel to the floor. While Jessica was trying to figure out why Rosie was performing what looked like an acrobatic move, she hadn't programmed that. Rosie began shoving Brittany through the access door into Rosie's belly. Stop it! Jessica screamed at Rosie. She grabbed Brittany around the waist and tried to pull her out of the animatronic pig's grasp. What had gone wrong? Why was Rosie putting Brittany inside her stomach cavity? Jessica had just seconds to think of these questions before Brittany screamed again. Putting aside her confusion and disbelief, Jessica yanked harder. Brittany's screams became shriller, but otherwise Jessica's efforts had no effect. Rosie was relentlessly stuffing Brittany into her stomach. Jessica couldn't stop it. Brittany went into the belly cavity feet first, and she didn't go quietly or easy. Kicking her legs madly, Brittany shrieked at the top of her lungs as she was stuffed into Rosie's open stomach. Between shrill screams, Brittany yelled, "Turn her off! Turn her off!" Jessica let go of Brittany's waist and tried grabbing Brittany's shoulders, but obviously Brittany wasn't thinking clearly, so she squirmed wildly. Jessica finally managed to get a grip on Brittany's upper arms, but she was no match for Rosie's strength. So Jessica tried to do what Brittany was now chanting. "Turn her off! Turn her off! Turn her off!" Jessica couldn't reach Rosie's control panel. Brittany's struggling torso and Rosie's relentless grasp blocked the way. Jessica ran behind Rosie so she could get the switch from the other side of the pig. Brittany kept screaming and fighting. "Just hang on," Jessica shouted. "I'll turn her off." Jessica reached for the pig's activation switch, but Rosie was significantly taller than the petite teen. Even on tiptoes, Jessica couldn't reach Rosie's neck. Leaping to reach the switch, Jessica failed again. She tried twice more, and finally she stopped leaping and instead grabbed a chair. As she dragged the chair over to position it behind Rosie's back, Jessica realized that Rosie had let go of Brittany's arms. She saw Brittany try to twist to pull herself out through the open access door. But not only did her body impede her reach, as soon as Rosie let go of Brittany's shoulders, Rosie got a grip on Brittany's head. Shoving her fingers through Brittany's tidy, slicked-back hair, Rosie clamped down on Brittany's skull. Brittany's eyes goggled. They swiveled this way and that, looking for escape. Seeing Jessica, she gave her friend a beseeching look. Brittany's face was covered in sweat. In cheerleading practice, they always joked about how cheerleaders never perspirated. They glowed. Well, Brittany's face wasn't glowing. It was wet with desperate sweat. Before Jessica could say anything to Brittany to try to reassure her, Rosie shoved Brittany's head inside the stomach cavity. Brittany tried to turn and reach for the doorway, but before she could, it slammed shut with a sucking shh. It was sealed. Jessica stared, her mouth hanging open. She then clamped a hand over her mouth. Her friend was trapped inside Rosie Porkchop. "Brittany? Britt, can you hear me?" Jessica shouted. For just an instant, the room was silent. Jessica realized her heart was pounding so hard that it felt like the rapid-fire beats were thrumming in her ears. Then, past the pounding beat in her head, she heard Brittany's muffled wail. "Get me out of here!" "I'm trying," Jessica yelled. "Just hold on." Jessica finished positioning the chair and climbed up onto it. Brittany kept crying out and yelling. Most of what she shouted was incomprehensible, but Jessica didn't need to understand her friend's words to get her meaning. Brittany was terrified, and she wanted out of the pig. Even a moron could figure that out, and Jessica wasn't a moron. She wished Brittany would shut up so she could concentrate, but she understood why Brittany kept yelling. Jessica would have been yelling too, if she was stuck inside that thing. "I'm working on deactivating Rosie," Jessica shouted. "It would help if you could just be quiet for a few seconds. I know you're scared, but your screaming is, freaking me out." A couple seconds of silence passed. Then Brittany shrieked, "Being inside here is freaking me out." Jessica, in spite of the situation, couldn't help but smile. Leave it to Brittany to be funny in a situation like this. "You'll be out in a few seconds," Jessica shouted to Brittany. Jessica concentrated on reaching Rosie's controls. Even on the chair, the control box was hard to reach, but Jessica was finally able to flip the cover open. After she got it open, though, she could tell that the buttons and levers were at an angle that hid them from her view. She would have to go by feel. Reaching, she sought for the controls she knew were there. From inside Rosie, Brittany shouted, "How much longer?" Her voice was even higher than ever, and it had a catch in it. Jessica was sure Brittany was crying. "That's enough of that," Jessica told Rosie. Jessica fumbled around, seeking the right button. Instead of a button, though, her fingers activated a toggle switch. Rosie Porkchop jolted so violently that she backed into Jessica's chair and tipped it over. Jessica tumbled to the ground, turning her ankle and whacking her head on the edge of a nearby table. "Crap!" she snapped, rubbing her head. Then she turned to look at Rosie. She blinked in confusion. Rosie was convulsing. And from inside Rosie, Brittany let out a sound that Jessica had never heard before and never wanted to hear again. It sounded like a cross between a howl and a screech. It was loud, it didn't sound muffled at all, and it quite clearly was the sound of excruciating pain. The only other time Jessica had heard a sound like that was when her neighbor's cat had been run over by a lawnmower. Interesting. So clearly Brittany's getting spring-locked. And I remember in the other story where someone gets spring-locked, the new kid, it also described the sound like a dying cat. So I guess it's very similar to that sound. Very cool to know. This is dark, and the story isn't even close to over. There's still, over 15 pages left, I would have to guess. So this should be fun. Before Jessica could even react to her friend's cries, they stopped. Rosie was perfectly still. Oh no. Oh no. Brittany, can you hear me? Jessica started to pant in total panic. What had happened to Brittany? Rosie went still. Jessica repositioned the chair so she could get a better look at Rosie's control panel. What switch had she flipped? Jessica appeared at the controls. Oh. She'd flipped the mode switch from suit to animatronic. Sorry, she muttered. She quickly flipped the switch back to suit. As soon as the switch was moved, Rosie's belly access door popped open. Yes! Jessica punched the air. She rushed around to help her friend out of the animatronic pig. When she stepped to the belly side of the pig, the first thing Jessica noticed was that the interior of the access door wasn't the silver gray it had been when she last seen it. It also wasn't dry. It was... Is that blood? As Jessica watched, a thick red drop detached from the edge of the door and plopped onto the gray rubber flooring. She gaped at it. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. Her brain was suddenly sluggish. She was having trouble processing what the blood meant. The blood and the fact that Brittany wasn't clamoring to get out of the pig was telling her something. Something she didn't want to know. Jessica blinked, then leaned toward the door, ready to help Brittany get out. Brittany? Jessica tried to see inside Rosie, but she couldn't. She could, however, see a scrap of denim stuck on a gear near the door cover. A bloody scrap. Jessica cried out and stood, shoving back the chair as she did. In the minutes that followed, she'd have a few cogent seconds in which she wondered if her sudden movement was what reactivated Rosie. Would Rosie have remained dormant if Jessica had just sat there silently until help came? Would Rosie have stayed frozen if Jessica had slunk off the chair and retreated slowly, stealthily out of the classroom? She'd never know, because that's not what she did. She'd made a loud noise, and she moved suddenly. Rosie's reaction was instantaneous. She reached out, and she grabbed Jessica by the shoulders. In an identical move to the one she used on Brittany, Rosie flipped Jessica upside down and then lifted her into a position parallel to the floor. Jessica screamed and started flailing around. She pounded on the pig's hands. "Let me go!" Jessica shrieked. Then she just started crying out for help. "Help me!" she screamed at the top of her lungs, even though she knew she was alone. When she realized how futile that was, she bellowed to Rosie, "Stop it!" This was just as ineffective. As Jessica fought against Rosie, part of her mind, the part that was still capable of logical thought, tried to figure out what she had done to make the pig grab Brittany, and now her. Had she gotten the programming very wrong? As soon as she asked the question, the answer arrived in a fleeting second of lucidity. She'd been typing in the name codes when they'd seen the robotic rat. Right in the middle of the process, Jessica had left what she was doing. When she'd gotten back to the computer, she must have flipped the codes. She'd gotten the commands reversed. Whatever she programmed Rosie to do to Cindy and Mindy, Rosie would do to Jessica and Brittany. And Jessica and Brittany would be forced to serve Cindy and Mindy. That's not how programming works. At all. I know there was, a way to tell the difference between adults and kids. I guess that could be what she's talking about, but it sounds like the robot is just, telling the difference between human beings, which is weird for a vintage robot, and also for a robot that apparently wasn't supposed to have that functionality in the first place. I'm nitpicking, but that's not how robots work. That's not how this robot works, anyway, from what they've explained to us. Anyway, why hadn't she double-checked her work? Brittany had suggested proofreading, but Jessica hadn't listened to her. Jessica had been lazy, and given that scrap of bloody denim and the complete lack of sound from Brittany, she was pretty sure her laziness had gotten her friend killed. Was the same thing going to happen to Jessica? She resumed fighting the pig for all she was worth, and still, she wasn't strong enough to break out of Rosie's grasp, but she had to keep trying. Jessica started screaming, shrieking, wailing, howling, kicking, and punching. Whatever remnants of poise and grace Jessica used to have unraveled with every caterwaul and every primal motion she made. Jessica's presence was a thing of the past, but none of that mattered. In spite of all her resistance, Jessica could feel her body slipping inside Rosie's. The rough edges of the belly access door scraped her hips and then her chest before rasping against her writhing shoulders. This could not be happening. As Jessica was crammed into Rosie's belly, she tried to grab onto Rosie's interior, hoping it would stop her forward progress. When she did, though, her hand slipped off slimy wetness. Jessica gagged and scrabbled for something to grasp, something that would help her disengage from Rosie's determined clench, but her hands couldn't find anything to help her. They just found more squishy warmth, all that remained of her best friend. Jessica stopped using her hands to find a way to get free. Instead, she tried to look out through the opening in Rosie's belly. All she could see, because she was face up, was Rosie's arms and the fiberglass squares of the classroom ceiling. The bright fluorescent lights shined in her eyes, and she closed them. She opened her mouth and screamed again. Maybe a custodian was still around, working late. Not likely, but possible. If there was a chance anyone was close by, Jessica had to keep screaming. So she did. No one came to help. Just as Rosie had done with Brittany, she now clamped her hand onto the crown of Jessica's head. She stealthily shoved Jessica's head into the open belly. Jessica noticed that the brightness against her eyelids was disappearing. She opened her eyes just in time to see that her head was passing through the opening of Rosie's belly. Just a couple more inches, and her head would be entirely inside. Jessica gulped in air and shrieked louder than she ever had in her life. It didn't do any good. Rosie gave Jessica one final shove. And Jessica felt the top of her head rubbing on the access door opening. She turned her head to try and see through the opening, and that's when she saw... Jessica shrieked again and retched. She closed her eyes tight, trying not to let her brain replay what she'd seen. Brittany wasn't even remotely Brittany anymore. She was just a churned-up mass of skin, locks of blonde hair, bits of bone, nauseatingly gleaming white tissue, and chunks of minced organs. It looked like Brittany had been pulverized and smeared all over the inside of Rosie's belly. Oh, gross. What was left of Brittany was entangled in Rosie's mechanisms, the gears and prongs and rods that were now drawn back against the walls of Rosie's stomach. Jessica forced herself to open her eyes, and as soon as she did, she thought she could see jagged shards of her brain that her brain told her were pieces of Brittany's bones. She refused to listen to her brain. She couldn't. If she let herself actually acknowledge that she was being crammed into a lethal chamber that had already chewed up her friend, she would lose what was left of her mind. She had to stay focused if she was going to figure out a way to get free. Wow. Jessica swallowed down bile, gritted her teeth, and started feeling around the interior of Rosie's belly. There had to be some mechanism that could free her. No matter how much she searched, though, Jessica's groping fingers found little besides gross, stomach-churning, wet sponginess. At one point, she closed her fist around what she knew, instantaneously, was a piece of Brittany's intestines. As soon as the pulpy mass collapsed in her fingers, Rosie's interior was filled with an abominable smell. Worse than any nastiness some skank might have left in a public toilet. Jessica's stomach flipped over in a dry heave. She opened her hand, shifted it, and tried again. She opened her hand, shifted it, and tried again. I just read the same sentence again. This time, she got a hold of one of the sharp rods that were a part of Rosie's hydraulic system. She felt blood trickle from her knuckle and wind its way down the back of her hand. Was that her own blood? Was it Brittany's? Did it matter? Thinking she might find something if she shifted her body, Jessica rotated to the left. Immediately, her continued shrieks crescendoed into high-decibel glass-breaking frequencies. Plastered to the other side of the animatronic's stomach was Brittany's face, looking like it had been peeled from her head and hung on one of the prongs that was now retracted against the inner wall. In the other Springlock scenes that we've had, we never really saw inside the robots what was going on. Now we see that. Now we see what happens on the inside. So, that's really cool. Although I will say, the damage that Springlocks do seems to be kind of inconsistent, because I don't see a single way that William Afton, from the novel series, The Silver Eyes, could have ever survived something like this. He survived getting Springlocked, I think, like twice, in the original books. Not in the games, in the books, though. And I don't know how he did it. Not with these kinds of Springlocks, maybe with different, slightly less lethal kinds? I don't know. Okay, let's continue. Still retaining its form, and with its bright blue eyes still in their sockets, Brittany's face was a grisly mask. The mask was bloody at the edges, but otherwise it looked unscathed by the destruction Rosie's systems had wreaked on Brittany's body. Her irises were where they should have been. Her nose held its proper shape. Good, that's good. Jessica gaped at the face, unable to look away, until the belly access door slammed shut with a very final, very loud whoosh. Then all she could see was darkness. Her shriek was caught in her throat, and she started to choke. Was that something else in her throat? It was. Something had dripped off Rosie's mechanisms, and it had fallen inside Jessica's mouth. It tasted like Jessica threw her head back and forth and spit as hard as she could. She tasted something coppery and salty. Jessica spit more and then tried to move her hand up to wipe her mouth. At first, her hand got stuck between her chest and a gear, but she got it loose and wiped her palm on her tongue. She felt her stomach roil. She was pretty sure she just swallowed a piece of Brittany's skin. This is the worst story so far in terms of, pure grossness. Yikes. She remembered how sweaty Brittany had looked when she disappeared into Rosie's belly. If her face had been perspiring, the rest of her had been. Jessica thought she just tasted blood and sweat. Oh, no! Jessica? Jessica froze. Hello, is someone out there? I'm inside here, inside the pig. Get me out of here. She tried to pound on the inside of Rosie's belly, but she again encountered gears and rods, and she also, yet again, felt way too many of Brittany's squidgy body parts. She stilled her hands and listened. Help me, Jessica, the voice said. Oh, no. Help her? What stupid girl wanted Jessica's help? It was Jessica who needed the help. Jessica opened her mouth to yell at whoever was talking, but then she stopped. Wait a second, she thought. That voice. It hadn't come from outside Rosie. It had come from... Jessica, I think we might have screwed up, the voice said. Jessica's breathing caught. It was Brittany. That was Brittany's voice. She wasn't dead? How was that possible? Britt, Jessica whispered. Jessica, Brittany answered. I'm glad you're here. I'm cold. She wasn't dead? How was she not dead? Jessica hadn't taken an inventory of Brittany's parts. She tried not to look at the gut-churning gruesomeness very much at all, but she was pretty sure she'd seen nothing but small annihilated pieces of human flesh, bone, and tissue inside the animatronic pig. That and the peeled-off face. There was no way Brittany could be alive. No way, Jessica said out loud. For sure, right? Brittany said. Jessica shifted her hips to try and stop a rod from pressing against her foot. She made herself breathe in and out evenly through her mouth. She wasn't going to use her nose again inside this abattoir. Okay. So, if Brittany was dead, then why was she hearing Brittany's voice? Just as Jessica had the thought, she heard a click. She sucked in her breath. The switch. No, not the... In the briefest of instants, Jessica went from thought to nothing but sensation, and the sensation was worse than any pain imaginable. Every nerve ending in her body registered a catastrophic, lethal attack, and then nothing. Jessica's consciousness was only darkness, no poise, no grace, no presence, no royalty here, nothing but blackness. Mindy and Cindy trotted toward the door of the robotics classroom. They were a few minutes early, as they usually were. They couldn't wait to show the class later today what they'd done with the dog animatronic that Mr. Thornton had assigned to them in the sophomore class. Mindy knew Mr. Thornton would let them stand up and talk about it. They were both really happy to do that. Both Mindy and Cindy wore red today. It was a total accident. Mindy had on her favorite corduroy jumper with a red and yellow frilly blouse. Cindy wore a new red dress her mom had brought her at the night. Wish I could speak. Cindy wore a new red dress her mom had bought her at the mall the night before. Okay. It had poofy sleeves, which Cindy had shown off to Mindy when Cindy's mom picked Mindy up to drive them both to school. Totally Meg, Mindy had said. She and Cindy weren't too up on high school slang. They might have been one of the reasons they didn't fit in. It didn't matter. They didn't care if they fit in. Mindy pushed on the door to the robotics classroom, but it wouldn't budge. Something was wedged up against it. On the count of 3, Cindy asked, turning to her friend. Mindy nodded. 1, 2, 3. The friends heaved their full weight against the door and it skidded open. A table was in front of it, as if someone had barricaded themselves in. But the room was, as they'd expected it to be, empty. Well, almost empty. When they entered the room, the first thing Mindy and Cindy saw was Rosie Porkchop. The animatronic pig stood a few feet from the door, watching them with a happy smile. The pig's curly tail whirred in a spiral. Hi, Rosie, Mindy said. Rosie raised her right arm. Both girls stared at her. Cindy tilted her head. I think she wants to give you a high five. Mindy laughed and slapped the pig's hand. Rosie stood, spun in a circle, bowed, then said, Hello, Mindy. Mindy raised her eyebrows. How does she know your name? Cindy asked. Mindy shook her head. I don't know. She looked around. Do you think Mr. Thornton programmed her with all our names? Shifting the animatronic dog that she held, she poked Cindy. You try saying hello. Cindy shrugged. Hi, Rosie? She sneezed. Hi, Cindy. Gesundheit. Cindy laughed. Rosie's voice sounded familiar to Mindy. Why? Hey, Cindy said, doesn't she sound a little like that mean girl? She pulled a tissue from her pocket and blew her nose. Which one? Mindy asked. She and Cindy had encountered more than a few mean girls in this school. Mindy didn't understand at all why people picked on them just for being younger. For that matter, she had no idea why a person's appearance separated them from certain social circles. People were people. Kids were kids. What was the problem? The one who's going to be homecoming queen, Cindy said. Brittany? She wiped her nose and crumpled up the tissue. Oh, that one. No, the queen is Jessica. The princess is Brittany. Cindy nodded, and her red curls bobbled around her freckled cheeks. Mindy looked at Rosie. Did Rosie sound like Jessica? She decided to see if Rosie would say something else. What are you doing here, Rosie? She asked. I'm here to serve you and Cindy, Rosie said, in Jessica's smooth timbre. Wow, Mindy grinned. She turned to Cindy. You're right, it is her voice. Cindy nodded. She stepped up in front of Rosie's eager face. What do you mean by serve us? Cindy asked the animatronic pig. Rosie did an awkward little shuffle, then bowed. I am your ladies-in-waiting. I will treat you like queens. I will do whatever you want me to do to help you and make your life easy. Just tell me what you need, please. Ladies, Mindy repeated. There's just one of you. I'm your ladies-in-waiting, Rosie repeated. Whoever programmed her needed a lesson in grammar, Cindy said. Mindy laughed. It's queens, huh? She giggled. Rosie nodded. Yes, you are queens. You deserve the best. I can't argue with that, Mindy said. Can you, Cindy? Cindy shook her head. She held out her backpack. Can you carry this for me? Rosie nodded happily and took the backpack from Cindy's outstretched hands. She turned toward Mindy. Milady, may I have yours too? Mindy snorted. Milady, that's hilarious. She gazed at Rosie. Rosie smiled her fixed smile back at her, waiting patiently. Mindy shrugged. Okay, this is getting kind of heavy. She handed the animatronic dog to Rosie. Rosie took it easily. I can handle my own backpack, Mindy said. As you wish it to be, Rosie said. Cindy laughed and did a little happy dance. This is the coolest thing ever. She sneezed again. Gesundheit, Rosie said again. Cindy grinned. I love that. She took out another tissue and honked into it. As she wiped her nose, Cindy looked down. She frowned at the ground. Is that... She pointed at the floor, and Mindy followed the direction of her finger. She saw a drop of something thick and red. Must be paint, Mindy said. Mindy grabbed her friend's free hand. Together they skipped to the front of the robotics classroom, with Rosie trotting along at their heels. Mr. Thornton strode into the classroom as Mindy and Cindy took their seats, and Rosie Porkchop set Cindy's backpack and the girl's animatronic on the table in front of them, and sat down. Mr. Thornton paused and raised an eyebrow at the pig. He looked from the pig to Mindy and Cindy, and then back to the pig. Did you and the other team, Jessica and Brittany, trade projects for some... Mindy and Cindy exchanged a glance. Yes, Mindy said quickly. I hope you don't mind. Mr. Thornton shrugged. I can't argue with the results you got with... He nodded. Well done, girls, he said. You've tamed the monster, but let me check something. He knelt next to Rosie's neck and flipped a switch. Nothing happened. He reached under her belly, felt around, then gave a tug. Nothing happened. He straightened. Good. Apparently it's been deactivated. What has? Mindy asked. Mr. Thornton raised his hand as if the topic was not important. Oh, I saw an article last night about the old Springlock suits, part animatronic and part costume for... He pointed at Rosie Porkchop. This was one of them. They were taken out of commission because they were deemed too dangerous for use by... Apparently sometimes these old animatronics switched modes automatically because of a glitch in the programming, so he patted Rosie's pink, big head. But she seems safe enough now, and clearly you've done a great job reprogramming her. Mindy and Cindy exchanged looks, then smiled at Mr. Thornton. Mindy grinned when Rosie reached an extension of her front foot into Mindy's backpack and pulled out her notepad. Thanks, Rosie, Mindy chirred. Inside Rosie, fused with the interlocking metal structure of the machine's mechanisms, two lifeless, disembodied faces stared at each other. Although the lips on both faces had perfectly applied, shiny lip gloss, the mouths guarded by that gloss would never speak again. The two faces would stare at each other in perpetual silence, their features locked in contorted expressions of horrified understanding. Wow! The end of the story. Wow! That was amazing. Just so terrible. I love it. Wow. Okay. Oh, there's a lot to unpack here with how messed up that was. So Mindy and Cindy never really found out what happened with the robot, what was inside, at least not yet. They will someday. We won't get to read about it, but they will someday, I'm sure. Or someone will. Someone's gonna find out what happened there, and it's gonna be a little bit awkward. Wow, that was messed up. I don't really know what to say. That was, I think, the worst story so far in terms of gore. Even worse than the breaking wheel. Anything that involves spring locks or something similar to it is just very gruesome. And we've had this happen a couple times now. It gets more gory each time. The new kid wasn't so bad compared to all this, but then you had the breaking wheel, and that was pretty bad. And this is just so like it pulls no punches. Like literally, I don't think there's a single way this could have been done in a more gruesome way. I think this is literally like the most gross and gruesome and disgusting they could have made this. Whereas in some past stories, I thought maybe they were holding back a bit. But wow, not in this one. Really messed up. I kind of like it though. The characters were really basic. But when it gets to the action, like in a lot of these stories, it really gets going. Wow. Okay. I've heard the Stitch Wraith story for this book is incredible as well. For its own reasons. Like, it has a bunch of plot twists or something. I don't know. But I'm going to read that next. And I'm going to do that, like, right away now. Because I just cannot wait. So I'll see you guys there. Should be out in, like, a day or two. This story was crazy. Alright, thank you for listening. See you then.